Wait, is shaken not stirred actually now a good description of bonds recently?
That's right. Put them all in a bucket and shake them up.
And equally deadly. Hey, it's Matt Robison with Mike Morton, and this is 5 Minute Finance, the rule and the title that we keep breaking because the show actually usually goes on for 30 minutes, but we try to summarize everything that you need to know in a nice, discreet, practical package because you have to get back to the rest of the things that you're doing. Mike, you actually want to talk about bonds, and warning up front, this is so dull. Bonds are dull, man. Bonds are so boring, but super important, and you kind of want to give people all right, here's the TLDR. Here's what you need to know about bonds, because bonds suck.
Bonds are annoying, yeah, except for one bond. Very fun to watch. But other than that, you're in your stock portfolio, investment portfolio, bonds are the boring part, man. That's what they're designed for. They're designed to be boring. But here's the question we're going to answer. I love the 5 minutes. And it's going to take longer than 5 minutes. Very sorry. But for you, the listener, your work will be very straightforward in less than 5 minutes. The question is, how much bonds should you own? What is the right amount? We always talk about investment portfolios, stock versus bonds. Okay, that's the first question. Come down with the breakdown. How much stock are you going to own? How much bonds are you going to own? So what is that? How do I figure out what is appropriate for me?
I need this information. I am so embarrassed by my lack of understanding of the bond market, even though as a matter, like coming out of politics and government, I get the bond market, but as a personal investing thing, I don't get the bond market. And it's weird because bonds are super important. They're so much more important than stocks in a way. Isn't the bond market like 3 times the size of the stock market?
Yeah, it's massive. Yeah.
And as a personal investing tool, it's critical, even though most people in their portfolio carry more stocks than bonds.
Yeah, most people, that's exactly right. And the bonds are a critical function. And in both of these stocks and bonds, you have a lot of gray area of risk and return. And you have a lot of what are they? There's a lot of different things you can buy, right? A lot of different stocks you can buy, a lot of different bonds you can buy. So we're not going to get into all those nuances today, but I wanted to start with the very real question of overall in my portfolio, how do I know how much of my what percent of that portfolio should be invested in bonds?
And by the way, I should say, as we reach the end of our opening 5 minutes here, that first of all, you've got some amazing rules of thumb that I'd never heard before coming up in this episode that really answer that question very succinctly of how much should I have in bonds? I've seriously never heard any of this before, which is it's pretty cool. Also, people should hang on for our listener question, which is about having buckets of money. I want to have buckets of money. Therefore, I assume that other people would also like those buckets. You can't have them. They're mine. And finally, hold on for our one thing segment at the end where we discuss one thing that's useful to know. One thing
it's going to be a micro thing.
It's a small thing. It's a very, very small thing this week. All right.
Hopefully not a small bucket of money, though. That would be terrible.
No, if this show were small buckets of money, I don't know if that would sell to people. All right.
Oh, that'd be good. That should be the title of the show. Small buckets of money.
Small buckets of money. Yeah, that's what this show needs is another title change. Great idea. All right.
Okay. All right.
So
moving on.
Let's talk a little bit about bonds. Bonds are sort of like the ballast in your portfolio. They're the
ballast.
They're the firm foundation. I don't know. There's some metaphor they're super important, but you just kind of don't think about
boring.
Them. They're dull.
Yeah. So bonds are, let's just a quick breakdown back to basics. Stocks versus bonds. Stocks are you own a part of a company versus bonds. You have lent money to a company or the government. You lending money, it's an IOU. That's the bonds. I told you there's a gray spectrum of risk and reward, both in the stocks and in the bonds. There's a lot of different types of bonds. I could loan money to Matt to start his podcasting empire, and that would be a very risky bet. It would be a risky bond.
What are you talking about?
You better give me 30% interest.
That would be, first of all, you'd make a killing because we're doing great. Second of all, I guess I prefer I prefer you take a stock position.
Yeah, that's right. Could I just say that? Yeah.
Right.
So, so that's risk. And then you could, we used to say you could loan money to the US government. That's very safe. So we still think of that as very safe loaning of money. Now, when I talk about bonds, I'm always much more on the safe end of the spectrum. I'm not into, if I want to take more risk with my own money or my clients, I'm going to buy stocks. I'm going to get more stocks. I'm going to use them for the risk. On the bond side, I don't really want to take a lot of risk. I want to get interest. I'd love to get 4 or 5% interest. And then I'd like my money back, please. Like I'd like my principal back. So I want it to be very safe. And so I use what we deem very short term. And I do use a lot of US governments. So short term being less than a year, I'm only going to lend money out for less than a year. So I'd like my principal back pretty soon. That leads to less volatility in the principal, and I get my interest. Now the downside is I might not get quite as much interest. All right. So again, I'm not going to get into the spectrum of bonds, but that's what they are, and how to think about them in your portfolio. You want, if it's 10%, $100,000, you would like that 100,000 to stay at 100,000, even if the stock market collapses by 20 or 30%. You still have 100,000 in safe bonds.
So let's get to your big question here of how much bonds.
Yeah. How much bonds
in your overall portfolio.
So,
could you give me some of these rules of thumb? Because they're eye-opening. I've never seen any of this before.
You never see these? Cool, Matt. So it's your age in bonds. Here's the rules of thumbs. We got a couple of them. You're supposed to have your age in bonds. So that would put you like roughly in the middle there, Matt. 50% bonds, 50% stocks.
Gosh. Wait, my actual age or like my biological age?
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Oh, boy. We're going to get into longevity now. It's your age in bonds. 20-year-old, 20% in bonds. 60-year-old, 60% in bonds. That's pretty conservative. So I wouldn't use that rule of thumb, your age in bonds.
Yeah. Can I question you on that for a second? I mean, no lie. I am about 50. But I shouldn't be 50% in bonds. That's like very old fashioned.
This is terrible rules of thumb. See, this is why rules of thumb are just terrible. And I should mention this. I actually don't use them. And people ask me all the time, and my clients, like, oh, what's kind of generally like, what do people do out there? I'm like, yeah. If you want general information, just go to the internet, go to ChatGPT, but like that doesn't apply to you. The general information never applies to a specific person. You have to know like your own situation. But this one is pretty terrible. So that would be the other rule you'll find out there, rule of thumb for bonds, is 120 minus your age in stocks. Okay, 120. Now, the previous one, if you think about mathematically, it's 100 minus your age in stocks. Okay, but that was too conservative. We just said that. So now we're doing 120. Okay, so if you're a 20-year-old, 120 minus 20 be 100% stocks. So 0% bonds.
I like that one a lot because that.
Yeah. Okay. So
that seems
almost like 40-year-old.
Close.
40-year-old though. I still think it's very conservative. Listen, 40-year-old is 120 minus 40. So that's 80% stocks for a 40-year-old. Okay. Could be. Yeah. And then 60 would be 60% in stocks. So that would be your 60-40 portfolio. So as you get to retirement, 60%, 60-40 portfolio. So that's why the new updated version, Matt, is 120 minus your age.
Yeah. I mean, that at least feels like it's, ballpark.
Yeah. Yeah, it's in the ballpark.
And so, but you're saying maybe a little bit toward the conservative side.
Maybe, a 50-year-old that still is maybe going to work for 10 or 15 years. Should they have 30% bonds? That's, maybe.
Yeah.
But it might be a little conservative.
Might be a little bit veered. So we like 120 minus your age equals the proportion of stocks. You also mentioned 60-40. What's that one?
Yeah, so this is they call it the classic portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds. You'll see the 60-40 portfolio all over the place. And one of the reasons it's actually been very well researched. So researchers that kind of look backwards and figure out, hey, how should you invest? Or, the academic research wants to slice and dice the stock market. They'll often use a 60-40 portfolio. just to, do their research. So it's very studied a lot, and it's pretty good. It's an all weather, because stocks do well. So you have a little bit more of them, 60%. But then you have that nice ballast of the 40% bonds, and you rebalance back, and it's a pretty good all around portfolio.
But wouldn't that seem pretty darn conservative if you're 30?
Yeah. I mean, usually people talk about it kind of in retirement, getting closer to retirement. Well, maybe you have a portfolio. Like in your 20s, you don't really have much of a portfolio. So, that's when it comes in as more as your retirement portfolio, the 60-40 portfolio.
Now, what if I just don't even want to use rules of thumb and want to let someone else figure it out for me? I'm a big target date fund guy. Like, is that okay?
Yep. Target date funds are great. They start off at 90% stocks. So for young people in your 20s and 30s, you got like 90% stocks. And then they have what we call this glide path that slowly increases the bond allocation from that small 10% to 20 to 30 to 40 by the time you're 65 or you're retiring, it'll be close to a 50-50 portfolio.
And so it sounds like it's kind of following the 120 minus your age and stocks rule.
Yep. Yeah, it does. And the nice thing about it, it's automatically rebalancing within there, which is great. Unless you hold it in a taxable brokerage account like Matt has done. That's a terrible idea. So don't do like what Matt's done. But target date funds, they rebalance. So you got the international in the US, and you got the big companies and the small companies, and they handle all that underneath. So you don't have to worry about it. So they're really great from that perspective as well.
By the way, joking aside, what you're saying about what I've done is it's not that being in the target date fund is bad. It's that I have too much tax drag because I haven't gotten the maximum amounts that I could into IRAs and...
No, that and you should not hold target date funds in taxable accounts because they do this rebalancing. You get hit with remember this dividends problem. Remember with the Vanguard and everything.
Oh, I see.
So there were not target date funds were not designed to be held in taxable accounts. They're designed for 401ks or IRAs, individual retirement accounts.
Boy.
Yeah, that's what they're designed for.
We might have to
not
actually talk more about that at some point, because I got to say, like, as much as I'm probably paying a little bit more in taxes through capital gains because they're doing that rebalancing from time to time, I also don't want to go in and like maintain a balance myself, insofar as I've got, not enough in my IRAs,
Yeah, but but this leads to a great discussion because I don't like any of these. If I'm working with individuals, I don't use any of these rules of thumbs, and I wouldn't use a target date fund. They're way too conservative, in my opinion. The glide path, they're designed for the average person that has an average career and then retires and then needs that portfolio. And they have an average glide path, okay, which kind of makes sense. But I think when you get to the individual, you can be much more dialed in on exactly how much bonds and stocks that you need based on where you are relative to retirement. And then, of course, maybe your stability of your job and some other factors.
Got it. All right. Well, I think we should bookmark that for a longer conversation in another show about the interaction between target date funds and types of accounts you might be holding. Why don't we, you have a couple of other kind of decision criteria that people can use. So you've got the rules of thumb, including the not very good one, but also the slightly better 120 minus your age in stocks or target date fund. What about the bucket strategy?
So here's the one that I really love. All right. So I set the stage, and if you're young and you're working somewhere between 0 to 10% in bonds, that just kind of makes sense, right? You're still accumulating, you can get stocks for the long term. But now if you're I get this question when you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, like, all right, when, how much should I have in bonds, or, getting closer to retirement or whatever. I like the bucket strategy way better. All right. And here's the way the buckets work. There are 3 buckets, Matt. You have your first bucket is for any spending you need in the next 2 years. Okay. We're going to hold that money in cash. It could be money market funds, earning, say, 4% interest. That's what I'm calling cash. It's like stuff that's just going to stay. You have $100,000. It's going to stay $100,000. Put it on the mattress. You can put it in your checking account, brokerage, cash. 2 years of spending. The next 5 to 7 years of spending, are in very safe bonds. Okay. And then finally, everything else is in stocks. And that's how you come up with how much cash and bonds to hold in your portfolio.
What I really like about that is it's very simple, and it's very, very practical. Now, I mean, like any method, I'm sure there are pitfalls. Like, you have to estimate what you need in 2 years and 5 years. You could be wrong. I guess there's no perfect solution here, but I do like, I guess 120 minus your age is also fairly straightforward, but I do like the way this is very tied to your needs and your particular family situation.
That's exactly what it is. Because I've run into every situation. I mean, I've run into all kinds of situations, of course, but often it's like, oh, I need 100,000, let's say 50,000 a year for my spending, and I've saved $2 million. Well, then you're not going to be anywhere near a 50-50 portfolio if you only need 50,000 a year and you saved a few $1 million. So you have the risk capacity for being more aggressive if you want to. Like if you have some other desires, we want to give a lot away to charity, leave a lot for our kids. You have the capacity to be way more aggressive than 120 minus your age.
Can I maybe sneak in our listener question right here, even though we're not totally done with everything we wanted to cover on bonds. And there are some alternative strategies that I think you wanted to get into to at least touch on very quick. But I just feel like the listener question ties right into this buckets theme. And the question is, when is it appropriate to have buckets of money ready for retirement spending? How far ahead of retirement do you think about that? And I bring that up here, not just because we're talking about buckets, but also one of the points you wanted to hit is, what about having emergency funds? So could you just talk us through a little bit, kind of buckets of money in retirement, how that kind of maps onto the retirement scenario, and also kind of how to think about emergency funds, whether you're retired or not?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me take the first one. Take the listener question. So, this is exactly what I'm talking about. With the glide path of target date funds, I find them to be a little too conservative. All right, I just told you I want 2 years of cash, another 5 to 7 years of bonds. This is spending, 2 years of spending, 5 to 7 years of spending, everything else in stocks. So therefore, if you're not within 10 years of retirement and you have a stable job where you expect, we need emergency funds. I'll address that question. But if you're 10 years from retirement, I don't see a large reason from a risk capacity standpoint that you need very many bonds. You're not spending your portfolio for at least 10 years. You're adding to your portfolio. That's the plan. Right. So why have bonds? We always want stocks for the long term. So if you're 10 years out from retirement, I don't see a need from a risk capacity, which is different than risk tolerance, what you are able to withstand versus what you can financially withstand. And so then the answer to that question is somewhere about 10 years out is when you start thinking about your personal glide path of starting to get more cash, more bonds, okay, for that retirement date. So about 10 years out is the answer to the question. And the second piece that I will highlight now is I would be more conservative. I'd head quickly, with that glide path towards more conservative at retirement. I told you 2 years of cash, 5 to 7 years of bonds. I'd stretch that a little bit at the retirement date, plus and minus the retirement date. Okay, maybe 10 years total. And the reason to be more conservative at the time of retirement is because of what we call a sequence of returned risk. All right. Okay. So that was a lot. It was like 2 answers in a row there.
All right. I think I'm going to need to hear more about sequence of return risk. It sounds like one of those technical terms that scares me. Actually, everything about having emergency funds kind of ready to go, it reminds me of when the expert advice at the beginning of the COVID pandemic was, you need to have a go bag. Do you remember this? Remember being told, you better have a go bag? I'm like, oh my gosh, the zombies are coming. What the hell? And literally, I started doing this, it's like, do I have a flashlight? Is it one of those ones that you can crank up?
Yeah, the winding.
So your batteries give out. Do you have water perfect? Do you have water in there? Do you have cans of food? Do you have a hypodermic needle? And do you have a rifle capable of taking down an elk? All of these are things that you need to have. Important. You're supposed to have cash in there, maybe gold bullion. I don't know. Yeah. So it sounds like what you're telling me is I need a go bag for retirement.
Yeah, you need a go bag. Yeah, you need a go bucket. You need three of them. 3 buckets.
That's it. Right. Especially
Go bucket.
if I plan to subsist on elk, which I definitely do. All right. Take me back to sequence of return risk. Those are 4 words that I can define individually, but not together.
Before I do that one, any questions on like the listener questions in the bucket, like kind of within 10 years? And now do you get why the glide path of the target date funds is a little conservative?
Yeah.
It's like slowly stepping you down.
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, I still, it's all about kind of like, you only get to go through the growth path of your life once. You only get one life, and, you only have the time where, like between now and retirement, you have the growth opportunity, and the opportunity comes from the time span until you need the funds. Yeah. And so if you're not maximizing, now look, I do want to sound a note here that I'm pretty confident you're going to agree with, which is your whole philosophy and this whole show is about, let's not let the perfect become the enemy of the good here. Right. And so I'm taking great solace in the idea of, am I in a target date fund that's probably too conservative and is not well aligned to my tax needs? Yes. Do I still have a decent amount of money invested and growing and, ready for my needs in the future? Yes. So should I be extremely unhappy? No, I should be very, very happy. And I think that's important to bear in mind. But I do take your point very much about kind of that glide path.
And this, I think what you'll find too, what I find, Matt, is as people get closer to retirement, say 5 years, now it's getting real. Like if your kid's going to college in 2 years, now it's real. Now you're like on college campuses, and like now you're getting the sheets with the amount of money. You're filling out the FAFSA form and the expected contribution for your family, and you're looking at those dollars like, wow, this is real. So when you get close to like 5 years from retirement is when I find people are like, okay, how much money do I have? Where exactly is it invested? Which buckets? Do I have the right things? And this is where you start dialing it in. Up until then,
you're scaring people. Listen, here's what you do. Okay, it just, this is a rule of thumb. What you do is you take the total amount of assets you have, and you light it on fire, and that's it. You're done.
There you go.
It's all going.
Just put in zero.
So, everything must go. There's no shelter. Put it all in your go bag, light it on fire, and get ready to live on elk. All right. Just take us through. I know you want to do sequence of return risk.
I'm not going to really do it justice in this episode, but the point here is, as soon as you retire, if you have a series of bad years of stock market returns, that can adversely affect you right at retirement date than it would 10 years before or 10 years after. Okay. So at retirement, hopefully you don't hit a bad set of returns 5 years in a row of a recession and a down market. If you're if you had that 60-40 portfolio and you thought it was really good, but you hit a bad sequence of returns, they were bad at the start of your retirement, that adversely affects the following 20 years, not in your favor.
I see.
So you want to be extra careful. The point is to be extra careful around the retirement
And
date.
when you say around, like how much before and how much after? Like 2 years?
4 or 5 years. 4 or 5 years either side.
Oh, 4 or 5 years to either side.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We got to start like 4 or 5 years from retirement. Like if I know I'm retiring at 65.
Right. So from 60
you gotta,
to 70.
like leading up to 60, you got to be like, okay, do we have the right buckets, the right investments? And then all the way through kind of to 70. Once you reach 70, Matt, you don't have much life left. And so you can be really aggressive and it'll be all good.
So this is like
that sequence of returns.
This is the Thanos blip of retirement. It's like,
that's right.
He's going to snap his fingers and you're going to de-risk yourself for a little while. And then you're right back to living riotously.
There you go.
Okay. No, I think that covers us. And you would teed up the idea of why not all stocks. And I think you've answered that, right? Like, I mean,
I think the message I want to leave is, the rules of thumb are good. Okay. You can be more aggressive when you're younger. And I don't really like them that much, the rules of thumb. That I like much more this bucket idea of how much cash and bonds do I actually expect to spend in the next 10 years? And let's just use that, for how much I should have.
All right.
And it gives you a lot more comfort because it's a better plan for you. So there you go.
Well, with that, And speaking of dwindling amounts of time, both in this episode and in our lives overall, let's cover what I like to call the shitty golfer principle in our one thing segment. I am a shitty golfer, by which I mean I got dragged into participating in some golf when I was a younger man. I was not good, and I didn't like it that much. And it led me to a really useful discovery for life, which is it's okay to shank the ball a little bit forward. Anything that advances the ball makes you better off, even if it's just by a little bit. And it's with that thought in mind that I introduce to you the micro exercise question. Mike, you as a busy parent, as one of the busiest people I know, you have dabbled in micro exercise. Would you just tell us very quickly, what is micro exercise and is it good?
Yeah, micro exercise is like the 10-second abs. Right?
Right, exactly. 10-second abs.
Micro exercise, it's about the habit, man. It's just consistency is key. You know, it's funny. It's like investing and exercise. It's the small little things that you just stay consistent with, add up to massive compounding gains. So yeah,
I think
I don't know about moving the ball forward with shanking it just a little bit.
No, you know what happens?
That's the way you're supposed to play golf, Matt.
Yeah, no. What happens in golf is even if there's a big difference between skittering the ball 20 yards to your left and skittering it 20 yards forward, because now you have better lie. You're using a different club. You have advanced the ball. Your next shot is going to be that much better. And it seems like, based on the research that I've looked into, micro exercise is kind of the same way. It becomes sort of this thing. We're all so busy that it's like, you just feel like it's one of these binary quantum. It's like you either have time for exercise or you don't. And the reality is you actually, it is worth it to do 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
How small? Yeah. How small a dose can I get, Matt? That's what I want to know.
Well, according to ChatGPT, for listeners to our last episode, research shows that it is highly effective. Short bursts of between 1 and 10 minutes are very effective for cardio health and insulin sensitivity, metabolism, all that. You can do little exercise snacks of accumulated movement throughout the day. They'll help your aerobic capacity. They'll help your muscle strength. And you could do little bursts like a minute of jumping jacks, a minute of mountain climbers, a minute of air squats. You could do stair intervals, stretching. You could even do something where it's like you do a little light cardio and then 2 minutes of breathing or meditation. All of that is good for you. 5 minutes. It's like 5 minute finance.
There you go. And I highly recommend trying to tie it to a habit you already have. I'll give you a nice example, Matt. I'm trying to stretch more, and I do it while the coffee's brewing. So I put the coffee on, I got a couple of minutes, and I will just do a couple of minutes of stretching. So they're tied together, like I'm waiting for the coffee, and I just do a couple minutes of stretching, and it happens every single day.
That's brilliant. You know, every day I have the same salad for lunch, and it involves me turning on the stove top. Yes, for a salad. Just trust me on this. And, you know, I have like 2 minutes right there where things are heating up. Jumping jacks, man.
There you go.
All right. Well, on that very pithy note about very pithy exercise, we will end this very pithy episode from Mike Morton and Matt Robison. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for joining us on Financial Life Planning. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to and rate the podcast on Apple iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. It makes a massive difference. If you have a comment or question, please email me, mike@mortonfa.com. Until next time, thanks for tuning in. This recording is for informational purposes only and should not be considered for investment advice. Opinions expressed are as of the date of recording. Such opinions are subject to change. I cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of the data presented here.